We're going to talk about Jonah this morning. I've got a quick story for you, and then I've got a question for you to chat to with the person next to you, so you can spend the story time working out which way you're going to turn. My mate a few weeks ago, it's an exciting time for him because his first child is being born. Exciting time. First child is being born. They're in the delivery suite. Some of you will experience this. They're in the delivery suite, and the baby is on its way. But there's a moral dilemma for my friend, because obviously you want to be involved. You want to be kind of there to be supportive as a man to birth first child. But equally and importantly, England are playing, and so he's got a strategy, which is to step out to the toilet fairly regularly with his phone. So he does this, and he's out and he's fairly locked in. So he's got his phone looking at it, and he goes to the toilet again for like a good solid chunk of time, because clearly it was getting exciting. And it was the Euros, so fair play. So anyway, he's watching this. And he comes out of the toilet, and he goes along the corridor back in the room, where he's confronted with a scream. Now, if you've been involved in any kind of delivery of children, you all know that is not uncommon, but this was a different type of scream. This was a scream of horror. He looks up from Kane playing a backwards pass and sees not his family. Double check the door numbers. To the person next to you, when was the funniest time you went the wrong way? Off you go.
Okay. Look up there, open it up, and please. It's not the TikTok TikToks, and people don't buy a beauty up here. This and look at it. I know how it's spelled. The third. The way that I had to do wording of the book was anyway.
So, I only know some good stories. As I said, we're looking at the story of Jonah, a man who was adept at going the wrong way. He's a painter. Oh, it was good fun with these like classical paintings, isn't it? The cloth always seems to land in just the right. Anyway, so we're going to look at the story of Jonah. In Jonah 1, God says to Jonah very clearly, he says, "Go to Nineveh, go to the great city of Nineveh." To put that into context, Nineveh was the capital city of the Assyrian Empire. Now, the Assyrian Empire was not nice. I mean, it was a pretty grim empire. I mean, if you know anything about history, you'll know that most empires are pretty brutal, other than perhaps the Cat Empire, who are an excellent ska reggae band, and to this day is still the best gig I've ever been to. But that aside, the Assyrians were brutal. The Romans used to crucify people. The Assyrians used to peel the skin off people they didn't like. I know. Grim. So is it much of a surprise when God says to Jonah, "Go to the city of Nineveh, the capital of Assyria"? Jonah says, "Well, I quite like my skin where it is," and decides instead of going to Nineveh, which is about 700 miles from where he starts, instead of going to Nineveh, he decides instead he's going to go to Tarshish. Now, Tarshish is the Spanish one, and scholars are divided on this, but if it is the Spanish one, that is 3,000 miles the other way. Jonah doesn't just drift the wrong way, he very pointedly sprints in exactly the opposite direction to where God's called him. My son's old enough now to start doing sports days. Don't know if you've been to sports days for like little kids. It's pretty funny. He doesn't win, bless him, which is it's fine. It's fine. I mean, in a way, I think when your kid's good at stuff, you can start getting competitive on their behalf, and that's not a good look. So in a way, that's quite good. He does it. So my favourite bit of kids' sports day is the relay. I don't know if you've been to a primary school relay. It is genuinely hilarious, because what they do is they get all of these tiny people, and with the patience of a saint that I will never possess, these primary school teachers try and explain to these tiny people like 4 or 5, take the baton and run that way. Take the baton and run that way. As soon as you get given the baton, run that way. It's like 10 kids there. Take the baton, run that way. And there's always one kid. Some of you are the parents of that kid. And I help at kids group, so I know who you are. As soon as they get the baton, they sprint that way. And it's fantastic because the teachers are chasing after them. All the parents on the end are like waving them back the other way like it's Forrest Gump. Some of us are sprinting the wrong way when it would have been easier to go the right way. Nineveh is 700 miles from where Jonah starts. Tarshish is 3,000 miles, but some of us are sprinting the wrong way when it would have been easier to go the right way in the first place. Lying is harder than telling the truth because you've got to remember it. Stealing is harder than earning because you've got to remember to cover your tracks. Abusing someone is harder than smiling. Remembering to delete your browsing history is harder than living open. Owning 2 phones is harder than owning 1. Sometimes it is harder to do the wrong thing, but we are still sprinting that way when we could have gone the way that we were called. 3,000 miles in the wrong direction instead of 700 miles in going the right way. A lot of the Old Testament is God giving his people a choice. In Deuteronomy it says, I set before you 2 choices, life and death, blessings and curses. Choose life. A lot of the Old Testament is God saying there is a way to live of life and light and increase. If only you would build your life on that foundation, to love and to be loved. I will show you the way to live in blessing. And Jonah decides to run to Tarshish, 3,000 miles, and unsurprisingly, there's a storm. Now, some of you this morning, you might feel like you're in a storm. Now, I know the Bible, storms are rarely good in the Bible. They're rarely good. They're symbols of chaos and disorder. And for some of us, we feel like we're in the midst of the storm. Now, I want to make this very clear. Right? Sometimes we're in the midst of a storm through nobody's fault. Bad stuff happens to good people all the time because bad stuff just happens. Sometimes we're in the midst of a storm because bad stuff's just happening. Sometimes we're in the midst of a storm because someone else's bad decision. And there's a whole nother sermon that you can write yourself entitled, Who Do You Need to Throw Off Your Boat? Or maybe we'll do it next week. I don't know. There's a title for you. Because sometimes we're experiencing a storm because of other people's decisions. Who do you need to throw off your boat? I don't need answers. Especially if they're here. No. Sometimes we're in storms because bad stuff happens. Sometimes we're in storms because of poor decisions of others and the impact they're having on our lives. But sometimes we are in a storm because we have been running the wrong way for too long. And sometimes the storm is a way of getting our attention. That's what it was to Jonah. Because in the midst of a storm, in the midst of a crisis, you recalibrate what is important in your life. And maybe, just maybe, if you are in the midst of a storm this morning, maybe, just maybe, there is a voice within it saying, stop running. Maybe, just maybe, there is a voice within it saying, you are running the wrong way. It's time for you to turn around. Don't waste your storm. If you're in the midst of one this morning, don't waste it. Maybe it's bad because bad stuff happens. Maybe it's because other people are making decisions that are influencing you. But maybe, just maybe, there is a call on your life to recalibrate the direction you are heading. Maybe the storm you are experiencing is an opportunity for God to speak to you and get your attention and say, stop running, turn around. Beautiful thing is that Jonah runs 3,000 miles from God and he still can't get away. It says in Psalm 139, where can I go from your spirit? Where can I flee from your presence? If I go up to the heavens, you are there. If I make my bed in the depths, you are there. I can rise on the wings of the dawn. I will settle on the far side of the sea. Even there your hand will guide me. Your right hand will hold me fast. Perhaps this morning you feel like you are at the end of a train and a chain of bad decisions. Do you recognize that you've been running very fast in very much the wrong direction? That's not a prophetic word. That's just, there's a lot of you, and I've got a basic grasp of statistics. So some of you are going through some storms this morning. But I need you to know that in the midst of that, you have not outrun the love of God. That no matter how far you have run that way, you have not outrun his grace. You cannot escape his mercy. There are so many parallels between the story of Jonah and the story of the prodigal son, of two people who have run off in the wrong direction. And in both of them, no matter how far they went from home, the moment they turned round and faced back to where God wanted them, in that moment, grace found them. And in that moment, mercy met them. Even though the storm was Jonah's fault, in that moment of turning round and repenting, he encountered a grace that carried him back to where he should be. I got married, and getting married is good fun, but it wasn't the time I knew my wife loved me the most. It was good fun. It was a really good fun day. Like, flipping expensive, but it was good. I got a bit of sunburn in April, which was novel. There was a groom's cake, which, in case you're wondering, is just you have wedding cakes, don't you? But I wanted one very much dedicated to me. A lot of weddings are about the bride, and I was like, no, I want my own special chocolate fudge cake. So I did, had groom's cake. Anyway, some of you were there. It was good. It was a wrapper. It was good. It was really, a really good day. But that wasn't the day I knew my wife loved me the most, because I know I'm not the most handsome guy in the world, but I scrubbed up all right. Thanks, Ballard. I did, didn't I? I was you kind of you feel if you're going to love me, then today is the day to love me, really. I don't want to be cocky about it, but when she said I will, I wasn't really that surprised. But of course you would. This is the best I'm looking. But that's the point. That was not the time I knew my wife loved me the most. Sometimes we come to church and it's easy when we are healthy and happy and looking good and the sun is shining to say, "Great are you, Lord." That was not when I knew my wife loved me the most. No. That was when I was sick. That's when I couldn't do anything. That's when for 3 weeks, every time I walked up the stairs, I had to sit down for 3 hours. And all I did was watch Brooklyn Nine-Nine in this kind of feverish dream that meant I thought I was Jake Peralta. When I offered nothing and yet she still loved me, that is when I knew the depth of her love. I knew she loved me when I'd messed up. And not one of those marital, 6 of one, half a dozen of the other, let's both say we apologise kind of arguments. No. When I have to say, I'm sorry, this is on me, on no one else, in that moment, when she still loved me after that's when I knew that she loved me. We can sing our praises to God when we are healthy and happy and the sun is shining, but let me tell you, there is a grace that you can only experience the depth of when you cry out in the midst of a storm, when you can offer God nothing, when you have gone after bad decision after bad decision after bad decision, when you have sprinted 3,000 miles that way when you could have gone 900 miles that way, when you have run from his arms, and in the midst of a storm, turn to God and ask for his mercy and experienced it. That is when you will know a depth of grace that you cannot otherwise experience. There have been times in my life where I have run from God, where I have pushed the stone in front of the grave and said, I don't want anything to do with you or your church anymore. When I've made poor decision after poor decision after poor decision and at rock bottom, like the prodigal son feeding off the scraps, living with the pigs, like Jonah in the midst of a storm caused by him and himself alone. In that moment when you choose to stop running, in that moment when you choose to ask for forgiveness, in that moment when you choose, eyes to the ground, ashamed, to shuffle your way back, having run thousands of miles the wrong way to take one step towards home, in that moment, we experience a God who runs. And experience a God whose love we can never outrun. Experience a mercy we cannot escape. Experience a grace that is available to everyone, but is most acutely felt by those who have got nothing to give back. And the prodigal takes a step home and finds a father running towards him, putting a cloak round him, a robe and a ring on his finger and a feast. Jonah doesn't get that. Jonah has to go on a fish for 3 days. Goes on a fish for 3 days because we always get forgiveness, but sometimes we still have repercussions. That we're always forgiven for our trespasses, but sometimes we still have to live with the consequences of them for a while. And for 3 days, Jonah is in a fish. He is carried through the storm back to where he should have been in the first place. He is carried through the storm back to where he should have been in the first place. That is the grace of God. And makes his way back, and he lands in Nineveh. Again, where he should have been there in the first place. But interestingly, while he is in the fish, on his way to Nineveh, over there, something interesting happens on the boat. Because the sailors on the boat, who have rightly chucked him overboard, they see that the storm has stopped now he's been thrown out. There is a storm that has been caused by Jonah, and these people have thrown Jonah out, and the storm has stopped. Now, I know I'm emphasising this point, but I want you to understand that for the people on the boat, at the end of this process, they give thanks and praise to God that they previously didn't know exist. At the end of this process, some people give thanks and praise to God who they previously didn't know exist. Even your worst decisions have potential for restoration for others. Even at the end of a train of your worst decisions, there will be people who can be impacted by that story of redemption. There is a God who can work in all things for the good of those who love. For some of you, you are experiencing a storm in your life. And let me tell you, even as you return home from that storm, my hope and prayer is that you leave a trail of restoration and redemption in your wake. There's my picture of a trail of redemption. Because even those influenced and impacted by Jonah's worst decisions, there is still some beauty that is brought out of it as he turns and changes and walks back to where he... So Jonah's in the fish. He's heading back up to Nineveh. The people have been impacted. They've been impacted by the story of grace of someone else, because your deepest and darkest mistakes, your most powerful disobedience can still be transformed into story of love and redemption and restoration. And he gets to Nineveh after 3 days in a fish. And he's got another chance, and he speaks to the people in Nineveh, and I'll quote you what he says. He says, 40 more days, and Nineveh will be overthrown. I set before you life, light, and increase. I set before you blessings and a curse. I set before you life and death. Choose life, choose blessing. And Jonah has a message for the people of Nineveh. Guys, you need to turn around. That's what repent means. It's the same word. Return, repent. It's the same idea. Come back, change your ways. Stop peeling people, guys. If God has put before you life, light, and increase, and death, dark, and decrease, and you spend your life peeling people, you're in the latter category. And Jonah's message is you need to turn around. You need to change the way you're living. You need to chase after the light, whereas previously you've been chasing after the darkness. Well, to be fair, that's what Jonah should have said. Actually, all he says is 40 more days and Nineveh will be overthrown. Which annoys me a bit, really, because when I'm asked to speak at church, I spend ages prepping it, and I come up with lots of things to say. He's had 3 days in a big fish, and he comes up with that. It's like the worst sermon. 40 more days and Nineveh will be overthrown. No 3 points. They don't all begin with the same letter. No reference to a PowerPoint presentation. It's lazy writing, guys. It's lazy writing. We should call it what it is. That's just me being annoyed. Anyway, Jonah says, 40 more days and Nineveh will be overthrown. It's time to change. The amazing thing is they actually do. Which is a surprise, given the Assyrians' track record. The king of Assyria, king of Nineveh, says this: let everyone call urgently on God. Let them give up their evil ways and their violence. including peeling, I imagine. Let them give up their evil ways and their violence. Who knows? God may yet relent, and with compassion turn his fierce anger, so that we will not perish. When God saw what they did and how they turned from their evil ways, he relented and did not bring on them the destruction he had threatened. Do not underestimate the influence you can have when you are obedient. Do not underestimate the influence you can have on your family, on your workplace. Do not underestimate the influence you can have with a few short, poorly constructed, I would argue, a few short words of truth as a result of your obedience. And eventually Jonah speaks to the people of Nineveh and they change. They turn around. They make some better decisions. Whether it's the cry of Jonah or the king of Nineveh, God listens and responds to the desperate cry of desperate people who are in desperate circumstances of their own creation. And I feel the end of chapter 3 is the happy ending we all want. Jonah has experienced a call. He's rejected the call. He's had a crisis moment with a storm. He's come back, and even in the midst of that trial and tribulation and crisis, other people have encountered Jesus in a way they wouldn't have done otherwise, and he comes back to what he should have done in the first place, and he preaches to Nineveh, and they turn around and they are changed, and it should be a happy ending. Honestly, this guy, we should be celebrating him like we celebrate Oscar Romero, speaking truth to power, hero of South American theology. Here's a guy who spoke up and changed society. The Ninevites should be like making Martin Luther King Day for Jonah, shouldn't they? Here's someone who's like caused societal change. He's brought about this amazing transformation because Jonah has spoken truth to power. We've got this, but that doesn't happen because Jonah's annoyed. He sulks. Which begs the question, how often have we asked for mercy for ourselves and demanded justice for them over there? I wonder, maybe Jonah wasn't so scared of the Assyrians and what they could do to him. Maybe he was worried what would happen if he no longer had some people to blame for all the problems in his life. Let's call it for what it is. Jonah's a racist. The Assyrians over there, they're our enemy. Jonah has taken a group of people and he has projected his failures, his fears, and his hurts onto those people over there and decided they are the cause of all of his problems. What's more, Jonah has convinced himself that God hates them as much as he hates them. No wonder Jonah is so angry, because he is forced to confront the difficult truth that God might love them as much as he loves us. Perhaps there is mercy for them as much as there is mercy for us. Now, last week, Neil got you lot to vote on whether you think the story of Jonah was like a myth, parable, a comedy play, perhaps, with lots of truth in it, or whether it's historically happened. Maybe you chat about that, maybe you've changed your thoughts this week. I don't know. It's in the Bible, so I say it's all true and some of it happened. There's a great deal of truth to the story of Jonah, because it's true for us as individuals, but it's also true for us as a society. If you read the news, go on social media, guys, it's just so easy to scapegoat, isn't it? It's so easy. It's so easy. It's so easy to decide, to draw a line in the... That lot over there, they're the problem. We over here, we're the good ones, but that lot over there are the problem. And if we could just get rid of that lot over there, we'd be fine. Can we just get rid of the rich, the poor, the men, the women, the elite, the undocumented? If we could just get rid of them, the old, the young, if we could just get rid of them, then everything would be fine. Guys, it is so easy to do that. It's so easy to do that. I find it interesting that this story finds its way into the Jewish scripture because it is a warning against what happens when we resort to our holy clique and decide that the grace of God is only for us and people like us, when we decide that the grace of God is for only people who look like me and sound like me and have the same story as me, the story of Jonah is a man who couldn't grasp that. And it finishes with this object lesson of the leaf, essentially God saying, don't you think I care about them? Don't you think I care about them more than I care about a tree? Jonah cannot grasp that perhaps there is mercy for them as much as there is mercy for him. One of the reasons that I love Kingsland so much, and I'm proud to be a part of this church, is because my time here, people from the stage have always resisted that temptation to paint the other as the problem. Now, you're all on different social media echo chambers, so I don't know who the they is in your life, but I bet you've got them. I don't know who the they is, but I know that people will love to tell you that they are the reason why things are going wrong in your life. They'll love to portray them over there as the issue. And if we could just get rid of them over there, then we would be fine. Like I said, depending on what echo chamber you listen to, the them over there will be very different. And you're told, because it's easy to scapegoat. It's easy to believe that they are the problem. It's easy to project our fears and our failures onto them over there. And Jonah is confronted with the beautiful truth that maybe if there's mercy enough for me, maybe there's mercy enough for them. That maybe the cross of Christ is enough for even those people. That maybe instead of demanding mercy for myself and karma for that lot, maybe there's enough grace to go around. Maybe this is a more communal challenge to show others the same grace and embrace that we have been shown in our darkest moments by a loving Father. So this morning, please know that there is grace for you. If you're at the end of a chain of bad decisions in the midst of a storm, no matter how many miles you have run from God, please know you are just one step from encountering a God who runs to you. A mercy that finds you. In the moment that you are right now, you can accept that love and grace from a Father who never took his eyes off you. I pray that you would know that grace this morning. I pray for some of you who are going through the storm. I pray that you would see a trail of redemption in your wake. Whatever you're going through, I pray that in a few years' time you can look back. And I'm not saying it was worth it, but I am saying good came of it. I'm not saying I'm glad I'm there, I went there, but I am saying that blessing has been bestowed on others around me. That there has been redemption and reconciliation in ways I never imagined, even in the midst of my storm. And I pray for us as a community, that having experienced that grace, having experienced that mercy, we would not be miserly in sharing it with others. That we would celebrate the success of people who don't look like us, who don't sound like us, who have got life experience different to us, who are nothing like us. We would celebrate their success. And when our enemies turn around, let's not begrudge them the same mercy we have so gratefully received. We're going to take communion to finish our service, which I think is appropriate. Jesus did not leave us a mantra. He left us with a meal. And that's because a mantra you can just repeat to yourself. Sometimes you wonder why we don't just take the bread and the cups home, just do it by yourself. I mean, they're kind of takeaway cups, so it'll be easy. But no, because there's a call to eat with others. There's a call to eat with others. There's a call to experience the grace that this bread and this wine symbolizes, but not as an individual. Knowing that there is bread and wine for you, and there's bread and wine for the person sitting next to you. And as we take this meal together, this communion, we recognize that there's grace for us, and there's also grace for them. Amen.